Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Quite an interesting example has come up showing the influence that news agencies, in this case Reuters, have on any given story and whether or not it'll be reported fairly across the world. Last week, China announced it would not be attending the upcoming Ukraine peace conference in Switzerland because Russia has not been invited. This could very easily have taken the form of a classic China bad story, painting China as irresponsible and petty and supporting the continuation of the conflict. But it turned out to be one occasion where the facts of the matter were laid out fairly and accurately and given due prominence in the Reuters piece, which had a trickle-down effect on other media reports. Today I'll explain in a bit more detail than usual with a bit of a longer video, so grab a cuppa. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. First up, there is some construction going on near the studio, so apologies if you can hear that. News media, including newspapers and online media, gather their stories from a number of sources, with probably the most high quality being a news outlet's own on-the-ground reporters gathering first-hand information for stories. As an example, that would include Shanghai Daily sending its own reporters to news conferences held by the Shanghai government or having its reporters interview people at the scene of a major local event. That's easy enough to do when events happen in your own city. Shanghai Daily's reporters can be on the scene of a major incident very quickly, collecting video and interviews, and editors back in the office can collate that information with the facts and figures from the government and footage sent in by citizens, for example, to put together a story. But Shanghai Daily doesn't have many of its own staff around the rest of China, or the rest of the world for that matter. So how does it go about getting that kind of content? Well, that's where news agencies come in. A news agency is an organization set up specifically to gather and create news articles and then distribute them to news outlets such as newspapers, websites, and so on. Basically, a news agency is a massive group of reporters who do not belong to their own news outlet per se. For example, they aren't putting together stories for their own newspaper, and instead give those stories to outside news outlets to use for a fee. News agencies may also be referred to as a wire service or press agency. Now, the three biggest news agencies in the world today are AFP, Reuters, and Associated Press, each having hundreds of staff around the world creating news content for subscribing news outlets to use in their own publications. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Shanghai Daily does not have reporters outside of Shanghai, so it relies on news agencies for its everyday news. If there's a major event in China, for example, then Shanghai Daily has two options. Number one, if the event is big enough, they might send a reporter to the scene to create original content around that story. Or two, and this is by far the most common, they'll rely on China's largest news agency, Xinhua, for copy. This is more cost and time efficient since it's not always feasible to send a reporter to cover every single China story. Here's an example on the Shanghai Daily website about a mining disaster in Shandong province. See there under the headline, the story is credited to Xinhua. Now, you guys might remember one of the biggest news stories from China in recent years was the massive flooding in Henan province, which particularly affected the capital city, Zhengzhou, and its surrounding areas. Instead of solely relying on Xinhua News Agency for copy, Shanghai Daily did send a small team to the location, including me, and we reported from there daily. I also made a two-part documentary on the flooding. Let's watch a little bit.
A few hours later, our road suddenly became what looked like a lake. We'd arrived in Sizhuang village, where locals were battling against time to save their homes.
This is a village of about 1,000, and they're trying to stop the water from coming in. It just keeps getting higher and higher over the last few days. The village just over there, of 5,000 or 6,000 people have already been evacuated. So now, just these people are left trying to stop the water from flooding in.
This digger was constantly bringing loads of dirt to the edge of the water as dozens of locals built a makeshift dam to keep the water at bay. What really struck me was that even as their village faced disaster, The locals seemed calm and were getting on with it.
怎么说？狗怎么说？
狗
可以。猫怎么说？
cat
This little boy was keen to practice his English with me.
Cow. Cow. 猪呢？猪。
pig
Very good. 猪 pig.
Now, I was really quite proud of our small team in Henan, so I hope you'll go and watch our work after this video. The link is in the description. Shanghai Daily absolutely does not have reporters stationed around the globe. That would just be way too expensive. So the newspaper relies on international news agencies for copy on international news. Back to the Shanghai Daily website, here we have a story on the Maldives banning Israeli tourists as a form of protest against the situation in Gaza. See underneath the headline, there's a logo for the news agency AFP, where that story came from. Some news outlets will choose to reproduce the agency story in full, like Shanghai Daily did here, and some will just use parts of it together with their own original content. Now, that's important to remember. So you can see then just how influential news agencies can be in the general framing of a story. Case in point, China announcing it will not attend the upcoming Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland later this month. Now, before I show you how Reuters reported the announcement, we'll quickly take a look at the facts. The Swiss Foreign Ministry is planning an international summit to be held on June 15 and 16, aimed at discussing ways to bring an end to the Ukraine conflict. Organisers have confirmed that so far, representatives from more than 100 countries will attend. Russia was not invited to the peace summit. China announced on Friday, despite having been in close contact with organisers over the past few months, that it will not be attending the summit for a number of reasons. Chief among them, the fact that Russia will not be attending. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said, China attaches great importance to Switzerland organising the first summit on peace in Ukraine and has been in close communication with Switzerland and relevant parties on this since early this year. China always maintains that the International Peace Conference needs to meet the three important elements of recognition from both Russia and Ukraine: equal participation of all parties and fair discussion of all peace plans. Otherwise, the peace conference can hardly play a substantive role for restoring peace. Based on what we've heard from various parties and the released arrangement for the meeting, it does not seem that the three elements proposed by China will be met. Now that seems fair, right? Imagine if your mum was having an ongoing battle with her neighbour and the drama was affecting the peace around the entire neighbourhood. Then another of your neighbours, who's always remained pretty neutral, decided it was time to get together with a plan for your mum and her rival neighbour to bury the hatchet and sort out their issues. But they decided not to invite your mum. Would that be fair? Well, of course not. Now let's look at how Reuters, one of the top 3 news agencies in the world, reported China's announcement. They ran with the headline, China says it will not join Swiss peace conference on Ukraine, which is quite fair and accurate. They could have used more dramatic language to subliminally paint China in a negative light, like China refuses to join peace conference or China rejects peace conference, but they didn't. Remember, headlines are extremely important since a large number of readers will only read a headline to pick up basic news bites and not bother reading the entire article. The second most important part of any article is the first paragraph, and that was also written fairly and accurately. Another large group of news readers will only read the headline and the first paragraph. In this case, they would still get quite an accurate representation of the story. Reuters wrote, China will not attend a Ukraine peace conference in Switzerland next month because it does not meet its expectations, which include both Russia and Ukraine taking part, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Friday, confirming an exclusive Reuters report. Now, I give Reuters high marks for this, since all too often in Western media reports on China, China's voice, in this case the Foreign Ministry, is purposefully not included in the most important parts of a story, if included at all. The second paragraph is given to general information on the peace conference, which is fair. And then the third and fourth paragraphs further lay out why China will not attend, including more quotes from a China source. It reads, Moscow was not invited and dismisses the talks as meaningless without its participation. The arrangements for the meeting still fall far short of China's requests and the general expectations of the international community, making it difficult for China to participate, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said at a routine briefing. China has always insisted that an international peace conference should be endorsed by both Russia and Ukraine, with the equal participation of all parties, and that all peace proposals should be discussed in a fair and equal manner. Otherwise, it will be difficult for it to play a substantive role in restoring peace. Top marks there for Reuters, whose fair framing of the story, based on the fundamental role news agencies play in setting the news agenda, was disseminated across media platforms around the world. Let's take a look at just a few. WION News, a usually quite anti-China outlet from India, ran with the headline, China says will not attend Ukraine peace conference in Switzerland. Their all-important first paragraph read, China will not attend the Ukraine peace conference that is set to take place in Switzerland next month, said the Chinese Foreign Ministry, stating that it does not meet its expectations of including both Moscow and Kiev. Nice and fair. NBC News in the US basically ran with Reuters' initial headline, except for changing the words will not to won't. The rest of the article was taken completely from Reuters. Al Mayadeen English ran with the same headline and some of the Reuters copy, but rewrote other parts, although the overall piece was fair. Even this Ukrainian news outlet used the Reuters story, but they changed up the headline a bit to cast China in a more negative light. Their headline read, China refuses to attend peace summit in Switzerland, Reuters. In the article, they accused China of being close to Russia and apparently not criticizing its attacks on Ukraine. But they left Reuters' more fair and balanced copy higher up in the article in a more important position. So there you have it, you guys, a fairly clear example on how much power news agencies have in setting the tone and agenda, and how important international stories can be framed around the globe. Unfortunately, as is often the case, the top three news agencies usually produce overwhelmingly negative and biased coverage of China. But I thought it important to show you guys when they do a good job as well. So what do you think? Should Reuters and other agencies try harder to produce more accurate and balanced China reports? And should China attend the Peace Summit in Switzerland anyway? As always, I'd love to know your thoughts, so do let me know down below. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.